The bell has rung. So get seated and join Elementary Schooled for today's interview.
Hi, welcome to Elementary Schooled. This is season 1, episode 16. And today we are talking about how to help our children with dyslexia or a different type of learning disability. And I am so glad to have a team today, a husband and wife duo. This is so fantastic. I welcome Robbie and Fifi Clayton of Learning Techniques from Utah. Thank you so much for being here. Will you introduce yourselves?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. We're really excited. So I'm Robbie, and this is my wife, Fifi, and we are two of the three owners of Learning Techniques. We recently acquired the business from the founder, John Heath, about a year and a half ago. And he had been running and operating Learning Techniques for about 30 years here in the Wasatch Front, so from Ogden to Provo. We couldn't be more thrilled to take over it. So and thank you for having us here on your podcast.
Oh, I'm so thrilled. Just a little background. I am a classroom teacher. I've said that before on my podcast. And I have been involved in a statewide training. I know that 23 of our states have been involved at some point in this training for doing a deep dive into how children learn to read. And so I guess when I started reading about learning techniques, I was very intrigued and fascinated because what I've been learning in this training, it very much makes sense and fits with how you conquer a learning disability. I'm not sure a learning disability is necessarily conquered. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, but definitely children can learn skills where they can do much better and they can progress and be at grade level. The work for them looks differently. The form might be different. But as I was reading about what you do and that your company's been around for all these years, it does make sense as it's multisensory. So I want to just jump right actually to kind of the main point and give parents what they want most from the get-go, even though I know this is a loaded question and it might take a minute to answer this. But parents really want to know, how can I help my child? That my child's eager to learn. I have a child that's bright, and this learning disability, and dyslexia is a perfect example, is really kind of an obstacle in the way. What can you offer right from the beginning of this to what to do first?
So sorry, before you jump in, I think it's important to note. So I like to call them learning differences because it's not a disability, right? These are bright, smart kids who are very
Right.
capable. And as the parents, you see their creativity, you see how brilliant they are. Just the brain learns differently
They don't fit in the box.
right.
Right. I mean, there is something that when they say learning disability, that I can understand why, because when we're trying to process information and somebody who struggles or has dyslexia or ADHD or dysgraphia, etc., their processing isn't efficient, right? So it does become disabling for them. So that's what we're working on is creating efficiency in processing information. And we do that, like you said, with multisensory activities. So we do physical and mental exercises to strengthen and build new neurological tissue to develop the neurological pathway required to process information. There are 10 different neurological processes that we use every day to process all the information that is stimulating us from all around. We do things to target the specific parts of the brain that need the connection to be made and to be built. So we do things to target those specifically, and it builds that neurological tissue. And it's not by doing things that seem academic. Doing things like marching, it uses both sides of the brain. creating a cross-patterning effect. And a lot of kids that struggle with things, if you ask them to march, they're probably going to do it like with, the same sided, like the same arm and leg, and they won't do opposites because they're cross-patterning struggles. And it's things like that you don't even realize your child can't do, but a lot of times you'll see that where they struggle with the neurological process, they also struggle academically with what those processes are responsible for.
So you are and I know this is one of the first statements on your webpage, that you are a physio neuro therapy.
Yeah.
And you are bringing a physical aspect, so the physio, and then the neuro, you're kind of rewiring the brain and how to work those things, two of those things to work together to be able to learn new skills. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And when I say learning disability, I think they're just some words that we use in education because we do IEPs, which is the individualized education plan. And so learning disability is the vocabulary that we use, but I absolutely agree with you that is just a learning difference. And I like that a lot, because I think one thing we have to be careful of is to not discourage any student. And it can be discouraging, especially if they feel like they're going through a lot of testing, then they automatically get a kind of a self-esteem downer, where we want our role is to lift them. So thank you for clarifying that. Will you give a concrete example of how physioneurotherapy has worked with an elementary school age child? And I will add these resources to the notes in this interview so that I know that you give a lot of examples and have a lot of testimonials of what has worked in using some of these tools. They do work. And so go ahead and give us a concrete example.
I should back up. Every program is catered to the student and their needs. We will always work on all 10 of the processes with everyone, but there will be extra emphasis on the ones that are weak for each student. But speaking to dyslexia, a lot of times the processes that are deficient are a process called tracking and a process for direction. So oftentimes there will be a tracking issue with the eyes, a physical tracking issue. And that manifests as dyslexia because as the student looks from one focal point to another, their eyes often pass that focal point and come back to correct. And they don't know that they're doing that. And so the eyes are feeding the brain the information backwards, because what they just read, they saw backwards. And so they might say saw instead of was. Things like that, right? So we do different eye therapies to correct that tracking and to get their eyes really sharp going from one focal point to another. And there are many eye exercises that we do, but they are physical eye therapies. But there's another component to that tracking issue that is sequencing of events. Like a lot of people that have tracking issues, they have a hard time learning to tie their shoes, following steps and remembering the sequence of things. So we do exercises to target that component of the tracking issue as well. So with any elementary age student, we're going to do a lot of the same exercises for each of them, but target the program to what their specific needs are. And the improvement that you see is just incredible.
So the best way to think about it, and I like to think about it, it's physical therapy for the brain, right? The body has given us a very tried and true process and method for how it gets stronger, right? You go to the gym, you exercise your muscles, you eat right, you sleep well, you do all these things, the body's going to get stronger, right? It's always been that way, and it's always going to be that way. And fortunately, the brain works the exact same way. As we introduce these challenging components, right, we're forcing the brain to kind of stretch itself away. But then once mastery is achieved, so once the eyes are tracking properly, then we're going to incorporate a new element in to that activity to challenge it just a little bit more. So as you're going throughout the program, each activity gets progressively more challenging. So by the time you're done with the program, you're like, wow, I can't believe I'm actually doing these exercises. And it's pretty remarkable what the brain is able to do if exercised properly.
You gave a good example. I think this kind of leads into a question about assessment, how you do that with each student that comes to you.
The assessment is done, it's done online, and the parent is instructed on what to look for and how to assess the student's skill level. And it takes you through all 10 processes, plus auditory memory and auditory discrimination. So hearing the differences in sounds and how long the student can hold on to auditory information. Can they hold on to it long enough to do something with it? So it'll go through all of those things, and the parent will have written instruction and a video demonstration of what they're looking for and how to assess the student.
I like that you're talking about the online assessment, and I think parents will be glad to know that this is just at their fingertips. They don't need to bring their child to a center, but that they can get these tools all online.
Yeah, so another cool thing to note about the assessment is a lot of times the symptoms that we're going to call out, the symptoms are the dyslexic tendencies or the lack of focus or the comprehension, right? Those are things that the parents already know, right? And the parent's going to be very familiar with those areas. But what is interesting about the evaluation, what's so valuable, is we're tying each of those symptoms back to those core processes and bridging that gap. Okay, here's the problem and here's the solution. And by going through these activities, we're going to be able to strengthen these core processes to the point where the symptoms go away.
Or very nearly.
Right?
Mhm.
And obviously the results are going to vary on the individual. There's so many different environmental and genetic factors that will impact one's individual results. And so I think it's important to note that once an individual completes the assessment, then we dump them right into our learning management system. Our platform follows a very similar look and feel to most other learning management systems, wherein there's a daily activity where we list out all of the activities that need to be worked on that day, and then it tracks your progress. And you can go in and you can view, the curriculum in its entirety. When you go back to the daily task list, it's just those specific things to work on for the day.
What might that look like for a child?
I just wanted to clarify. So the child is not sitting at the computer doing
Okay.
all of this. It is the parent or whoever's going to be helping them through this. They don't even have to have the child with them when they're going through it necessarily.
Okay.
But they can go in maybe while the student's at school and read about what they're going to do that day and watch the videos and get familiar with what they're looking for and how to teach it to their child. And so the student is not spending time at the screen ever.
Perfect.
It's not part of the program.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
This is very much a resource for the parents, right? We're enabling the parents and giving them the tools and resources they need to really work on these activities with their students. And so just backtracking just a little bit, once the student completes, or once the parent and the student complete the assessment, we will give them 7 free activities to really find out if this is going to be a good fit for them, right? We want to make sure that this is going to be something that they're comfortable committing to, because it does take time. It's a process. So we want to give them all of the information they need to make the best decision for their family. But the activities that they're going to be working on, they're going to have activities from all 10 of those different processes. So you're going to have at any given day, you're going to have a tracking component, a focus component, a figure ground,
Cross patterning, I mean, it's all of them. A couple of them are combined, which is why there are 7 exercises that they get for free, but it actually does work all 10 of those processes.
So how much time per day would you say to be able to see a consistent amount of progress?
It'll start out smaller, as low as 20 minutes a day at first, and then they'll build up to where it could be an hour a day. So there will be kind of a peak. Probably like 3/4 of the way through is where they're going to be about an hour a day, but then it's going to start tapering back down.
So we tell people on average to plan on about 45 minutes to an hour a day of practice.
Of practice.
And 5 days a week for about 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah. But it will be less than that for quite a while in the beginning, spending an hour a day.
And to make
Up
it
to an hour a day.
fun, right? To make it
Mhm.
positive and fun so that
Yes.
the child knows, like, this is so cool. This is going to help. These tools and exercises are going to just help with your reading
Yeah.
and your writing or your attention, whatever you're working on. One thing I feel like mentioning is sometimes we'll come to a parent conference and we recognize what we're seeing with a child in the classroom, and the parent is usually well aware of the struggle as well, in terms of dyslexia or another learning difference, as you say. But parents will go to a pediatrician and then be referred to a specialist like a neuropsychologist. And that testing is very good, but it's very expensive and very time consuming. And so sometimes we have families come back to us, like, now we have these results and we work together and we are doing all that we can on our end. But I feel like what you do helps to bridge this gap. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, a lot of those formal medical tests are expensive, and you'll often wait for months on a waiting list, or
Yes.
sometimes longer.
Since COVID,
Um,
that's especially true.
Yeah, yeah. And so what we've done is we've bridged that gap, right? We've made these tests much more accessible, and in fact, accessible for anyone who's willing to put in a little bit of time, about 45 minutes to an hour. And what we're doing in the assessment is we're testing for the cognitive ability of the individual across all 10 of the processes that we focus on throughout the program. And it's important to note that, we're not diagnosing, we're simply identifying the symptoms and bridging that gap and giving the parents hope and saying, okay, yeah, here's the symptom that we already know, and here's the process. And if we can strengthen that process, right, little by little, those symptoms are going to go away. So,
Yes, I think that's really important. A lot of those tests really are, they're very thorough and might identify, but if you can do that, or maybe if you don't have great insurance or it's going to be very costly, those areas can be identified, like you said, just in a different way.
exactly.
Will you,
Exactly.
let's back up a little, and will you share your personal story? Because I think it's really makes an impact on how you came to this and what you do now. And it's really nice for other parents to hear stories of offering hope for when your child is struggling, and then they can come out of it and do really well in school.
So our daughter was 7 years old. She had struggled through preschool, learning her letters and sounds. She graduated preschool not knowing many of them. In kindergarten, she got a good chunk of them, but still was struggling with that. Any sight words that were sent home, it was impossible. And they'd send us 10 a week. And this went into first grade too, but they would send us 10 cards a week, and I'd take it down to 2. And we would just work on those 2 cards every day. And I would go from one to the other and back, and by the time this one came back to the front, she had never seen it before. It was gone. There was no short-term memory. There was no visual memory. And since she struggled with her sounds anyway, she couldn't sound it out either, so it was just hard all around. And she would get very discouraged, and why can't I do this? Everyone else is doing this. Why can't I get these?
It was really affecting her confidence and her self-esteem
Yeah.
at school.
Sure.
She didn't want to go to school, right? She would fake sick.
Well, and even when we would sit down at dinner, I knew she struggled with sounds too. We would sit down at dinner and take turns rhyming words to learn what rhyming is. And she would just always say, no, I can't do it. She didn't even want to try in front of siblings who weren't even making fun of her,
Sure.
but because she could see they could do it, and she didn't want to fail. So she would rather say she's not going to try, because she had experienced failure so much that she would just avoid instead. She started doing spelling words, and oh boy, that one was rough. We would practice her spelling words every day, and I'd have her write them all down, 10 times each, and say them as she was writing them and everything. And then I would give her a spelling test, and anything she got wrong, we would write it 5 more times, and so it took 45 minutes, an hour every single day. And on Friday, she'd come home in tears and not wanting to show me her spelling test because she got maybe one of them correct, and it was heartbreaking to watch. Of course, I wasn't getting after her for not getting them correct. Like, I could see that this was a struggle for her, and she was really trying, but it was heartbreaking. And so I started looking into other options, because I thought, this isn't working. The repeated exposure, the doing and doing and doing isn't working. And it's only making her,
drilling.
yeah, and it's only making her feel badly about herself because she's trying so hard and can't do it. And so then we came across this program, the Learning Techniques program, and it just, I took her to be evaluated, because at that time it was all in person, and I found out she can't march. She can't do jumping jacks, like simple things that I didn't realize she couldn't do. I learned a lot about what her skill level was, and what the underlying causes were at that time. And so I decided to enroll in the program, and I told her teacher, and she was in 2nd grade at this time, she was 7 years old, we're going to be doing this program for the next 6 months. We're not going to be touching homework anymore because it wasn't working, so we're going to give this a shot, and I hope you understand. And luckily she was very understanding and supportive.
But we had already done the IEP route, right? She was already in the special ed program at school. She was being pulled out twice a day for reading and spelling and math.
Because math facts were another thing she could not get them.
We had already exhausted all of our resources seemingly with what the school provided, and not to say anything bad about the school, because they did a fantastic job, and they were very supportive and very encouraging.
Yes.
Well, and their job is academics. It's not brain connections. So, they're doing what they can, but there's
It's
more.
just going deeper. It's going deeper,
Yeah.
because sometimes when students are pulled out for special education services, they're working in small groups. And even if they're working individual one-on-one, might not be able to take that complete deep dive into the multisensory therapy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And two, I love that you communicate with a classroom teacher, because we're very supportive of any outside resources that help a child. And so even if they're leaving for a specific therapy or tutoring that can only happen during the daytime, or like you said, we need to cut way back on homework. We don't want anything to be discouraging to a child, because that is counterproductive. And so I love that you had these conversations with the classroom teacher. So you started then this program for 6 months.
We started with just really small, simple things, and her confidence levels started going up, because she learned that she could do some things. She had never really succeeded in anything she was trying. And so by starting really small, and it wasn't academic in nature, and so by starting really small, it's something that she couldn't do, but could practice and conquer. It started building this confidence. And so she started really enjoying some of the exercises that we do, plus they're fun anyway, a lot of them. She was observant to what was going on around her, and she was able to process it. So a couple of months, I would say probably 3 months into the program, she came home beaming, just so excited to show me a spelling test because she had gotten 90%. And she hadn't practiced at home. We'd done nothing because
Wow.
we were only doing this program, but we had built her visual memory. So the exposure that she got in the classroom was enough to carry her to the test on Friday.
That's
And
so
it was
cool.
just, it was amazing. And in fact, her teacher asked me, she's like, so did that program not work out? Because you guys must be studying, you know? And I was like, no, we're not studying. This is just the program that we've been. I mean, now, so she's in 7th grade now. So we have a daughter who's 10 months younger than her, who in the beginning just was flying past her. And now she's asking our other daughter for help in math and things like that, where like she's really doing very well and she understands concepts and how to apply them, all from when she was 7 years old. We haven't had to continue anything after the 6 months of the program. Once she finished it all, things that you do daily, exercise those processes. But now, since she has created an A to B route, it uses that naturally now. And so it continues to strengthen just by doing everyday activities.
That's amazing. What does she say about that time of those 6 months in the program?
She doesn't say a whole lot now, except that she thinks that she can come to my work and teach people.
That's telling right there. That's pretty good. It offered for any student K through 12.
K through any age.
Yeah,
But
kindergarten's on the young end.
7 years old is usually where we like to start. I do have a junior program, but they're not going to go through the whole program because there are still neurological processes that haven't naturally had the chance to develop yet. So they'll do some things that are meant for younger kids to strengthen the processes that maybe are deficient, but it won't be the entirety of the program.
Well, I definitely observe and believe in the rewiring of the brain. And from a personal aspect, I did something called EMDR, which is a therapy for PTSD, but it involves some eye movement and it has the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain working together and coming together. And I still to this day marvel at that. I don't completely understand even how it works, but I know that it worked. And so I think it's probably a similar concept that these exercises involve using both sides of the brain, and then it comes together and pushes a child forward in these skills. And it's absolutely fascinating. I'm glad that you mentioned that it's not on the screen and that it's a very engaging process and interactive. So all the exercises are that way.
Yeah, you'll get to the end. There's a reading portion at the end. It's not like any other reading that you ever do because you do it in different ways. But apart from that, they're all pretty engaging physically and mentally, of course. But yeah, it's not going to feel like they're doing schoolwork ever.
Yeah, so at no point in the program will you sit your student down at a desk and say, work on this while I go cook dinner, right? Like it's a very active, and you said engaging, it's a very engaging process between parents and students.
I would love to have your input on this, even though I didn't ask it in the pre-interview. As a classroom teacher, I've made a lot of observations on how, for example, kids that we see now have been very involved in being on technology or an iPad. Like I see my 5-year-old granddaughter and she knows, she's so smart and knows how to work it. I have wondered, and I'm just want to know your opinion on this. Do you think that that's part of these learning differences? Is that just being on, even learning games? So it's that their brain is tracking and doing things different on screens than what the traditional way of teaching is. And so do you notice that with children as you work with them?
Absolutely. So, and there's a time and a place for everything. I'm not saying kids should never have screen time or anything.
Oh, right.
There's
There's
times
so
to be
many good
appropriate with that.
programs,
Yeah.
and they will be on
Yeah.
programs in the classroom too. But
Oh,
it made me
absolutely.
wonder
Yeah.
if that is what's causing some of this, not necessarily bad, but just that they kind of have to get both. And for some students, it might be more challenging to do both. Is that fair?
Yes. Being on a tablet or whatever device, there's a lot less tracking left to right, like an EMDR.
Exactly.
I need to back up. So you have midlines that go down your body. You have one down the side, one down the front, and across your waist horizontally. And as you cross those midlines with part of your body, it engages both sides of the brain to work together, which is why we do so much marching and things like that, that you cross these midlines for. And your eyes do the same thing. As you look left, your right eye crosses that midline. And as you look right, your left eye crosses that midline. With tablets, there's a lot less left to right movement and a lot more up to down. There's scrolling, right? And so it takes away a lot of the tracking that is natural for us and that we need to have in order to have good physical tracking, but also to engage that cross patterning a lot more. And the physical holding of a pencil requires some cross patterning. In fact, during my program, one of the exercises is you have to do it with your non-dominant hand, which is it engages the cross patterning in a much more complex way. So there are a lot of things like that that I think that we miss out on when we're on screens too much.
I think that's a huge help to parents because our kids are growing up that way now, and there's such great programs and learning activities that they can do on the screens, but what you say makes sense. It's going up to down, and we see a lot of that, as we'll notice, not just in the reading but in the writing. So the orthographic concept of that. What hope can you offer to families, because it is so hopeful? There's so much we can do now.
I think it's just important to note, like you said, there is hope, right? There's always something more that you can do. And just because this isn't technically mainstream, even though that's where we're going, right? We want to be in the mainstream. There is hope. And it's relatively speaking, it's simple. These aren't complicated tasks that we're asking to do. Because again, these aren't complicated activities. What's important is that you're consistent in the activities, and they do get a little more complicated.
Well, they get much more complicated, but by the time you get to those, the student doesn't think that. The parent does. They go, how are they doing this?
We start with 7 activities
Okay.
that we give them access to on the learning management system, that after they complete the assessment, they can go test drive the site, test drive the platform,
Get a feel for what you're going to be doing and how your child might respond to it. I think the biggest thing is to show them that this is not academic based, because the last thing a parent with a struggling child wants to hear is do more of the same. They know that this is hard. They know it ends in tears. They know their student struggles with this. They can't do more of it. It's not that. It's completely different. And a lot of them really are fun, and the kids really enjoy it. And it's I have parents tell me all the time that they love the one-on-one time that they're spending with their student. So it's really beneficial on both ends, and for the whole family, because if you have even just one person in your family that's struggling with things, and it can even be with their attitude, they overreact to everything, we address that in these learning processes. It can change the whole family dynamic.
Well, I like that you call everything an activity, because kids are always game for an activity, and they might not
Yeah.
even know that these exercises are doing something to
Right.
help with
Right.
specific, eventually with academic needs. And so I think it's the approach that we make as parents and teachers, and
Yeah.
making it fun, and that
Yeah.
as they see the progress, they're going to be, their confidence will increase. So I think this is a
Yeah.
great program.
That's such a great point. Like, have fun with it. A lot of the activities, you can bring other kids into it. So many of the activities you can incorporate the whole
Mhm.
family. And so we offer our families on this LMS, they can create up to 5 accounts for their independent family. So you can put all your kids through the program and track their progress independently, because they will
And do an
progress.
assessment on each child.
Yeah, because they will progress differently, and they're not going to progress at the same rate.
Thank you. You've been such a great interview. I do want to add these resources to the show notes, but just for clarity for listeners on the podcast, will you explain how to get to your site? And also, you're offering a discount if it's through this podcast. So, will you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So to take the free online assessment, simply go to learningtechnics.com. And there are links and banners all over the site to take the free online assessment, and you'll create an account. It's a no obligation account, so you don't need a credit card to start the assessment or to start the account. To access this program, go to learningtechnics.com, and listeners from this podcast will receive a special 10% discount by using code SCHOOLED10. That's SCHOOLED10. Do the assessment. It'll take you about 45 minutes to an hour to complete the assessment. But then with this promo code, and with that promo code, we'll offer your listeners an additional 10% off the services. And once you gain access to the site, you have it for life. So we're giving you lifetime access to the platform, and all of the materials. There are supplemental materials that you will need to complete a lot of the activities. With that, we'll include a materials package that will be shipped off to you as well.
I love it. This is so great. I don't know that we're necessarily, when we talked about dyslexia, if we're necessarily seeing more, or if we're just more aware of what it looks like.
Yeah.
And it's nice to have this as a resource, because this time at home and in that their natural setting and just doing fun activities can surely make a difference in the classroom, because we can't do this one-on-one in the classroom. We want to, but we can't. There's a lot that we can do to help in the classroom, but this is a very specific to what their needs are. And so it is a great program. Thank you so much. You've been a great interview.
Just thank you for having us. This has been fun.
I do like to end with a little Christian thought, and it's from Proverbs 3, one of my favorites. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. I want to encourage parents that when you feel really frustrated or upset by seeing the suffering of your child, to take it to the Lord too, and just pray for this, because things come together and you will be directed on what path to take. And today you're offering us a new path for a child that may need these services, and it could be the answer. But there's a lot of great resources out there, and we just have to explore and look for what is best for our kids, because we know them best as parents. So thank you so much for explaining how physioneurotherapy works and how your program operates. I wish you the best success.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thanks for being part of today's class. To submit a question or topic for further episodes, please email elementary.schooled@outlook.com. School is out for today, but please remember, when we strengthen a child, we strengthen society.